Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating and deeply metaphorical 2005 essay by Zhufeng. It's titled Shocking Thunderclap in Silence. What makes this text so unique is how it blends a very personal, everyday anecdote with a massive, cosmic warning. It literally starts with something incredibly ordinary to expose the invisible forces shaping our entire world. So let's jump right in and see what the author is trying to tell us. So picture this. How on earth does a broken van axle connect to the ultimate fate of humanity? I know, it sounds like a massive, almost impossible leap, right? But stick with me, because this is the core mystery that drives the entire narrative of Zhufeng's essay. He takes a highly specific, very localized event from his own life and uses it to build a bridge to this grand cosmic argument about unseen dangers looming over human society. We're going to follow his logic step by step to see exactly how a simple car part becomes a literal metaphor for the apocalypse. Section 1. The Broken Axle. A Hidden Danger. All right, our story kicks off on a totally normal day right around Christmas. The author is driving a van taking 8 of his employees from his store to a fast food restaurant and bar he owned about 10 kilometers away. They're just celebrating the holiday, the mood is joyful, the drive is completely routine. But then, right as the van pulls up to the bar and comes to a stop, they hear this sharp clack. Instantly, the left front wheel drops straight to the ground and the entire vehicle tilts violently to the left. He gets out of the driver's seat, heart pounding, to check it out, and what does he find? The heavy steel axle supporting that left wheel has completely snapped in two. Fast forward a week, he takes this busted van to a British mechanic at Sadie Motor Shop. And the mechanic? The guy's absolutely stunned. Holding the broken pieces of heavy metal, he actually calls it a miracle. The greatest creator's protection. He explains to the author that normally, if an axle snaps like that while you're driving at high speed, the van absolutely should have flipped. It would have caused severe injuries to the 9 people inside, not to mention a potential massive pileup with the cars around them. The fact that this axle somehow held together just long enough for the van to come to a complete, safe stop before finally giving away, well, it completely defied all mechanical odds. Now, here is the absolutely crucial point, based on what the mechanic discovers next. He realizes this break wasn't some freak, sudden event. Not at all. The deterioration actually began half a year ago. For months and months, there was this invisible fraying, a microscopic breakdown happening bit by bit as that van was driven day after day. The author had been driving fast, completely oblivious to this fatal danger growing right beneath his feet. On the day of the drive, the van finally stopped, and a moment later, the axle snapped. The break was just the final, visible consequence of a long, silent, entirely invisible deterioration. Moving into Section 2, Hidden Disasters, Macro-Axle Fractures. So this brings us to the ultimate million-dollar question, the one the author asks himself after surviving this near-death experience. If a solid steel axle can break invisibly over months, while everyone inside the vehicle is completely clueless, well, what about a society? What about the entire planet? Zhufeng takes the terrifying realization of that hidden mechanical failure and seamlessly scales it all the way up to encompass the entire human experience. He suggests that the world we live in actually operates on those exact same hidden mechanics. The essay then lays out this overwhelming list of what he calls macro-axle fractures. We're talking natural disasters like earthquakes and typhoons, societal catastrophes, wars and riots, even infrastructural failures like sudden massive power outages, and deeply personal health crises like unexpected strokes. According to Zhufeng, none of these devastating events just pop out of thin air. Just like that van's axle, the conditions for these disasters deteriorate over a long, long period. They're hidden in the silence, fraying bit by bit before suddenly snapping into catastrophic reality. Now, what's really fascinating here is how he points out this classic flaw in human nature. Think about it. We are obsessively focused on consequences. We literally wait for the axle to break, and then we live in regret, ignoring all those early warning signs that were there the whole time. Focusing on prevention, on the other hand, requires early checks. It means actively working to detect that invisible deterioration. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Because the deterioration is invisible, because we can't see or touch it in our day-to-day lives, anyone who tries to point out the danger is usually mocked. They're called alarmists, accused of talking nonsense, or just dismissed as crazy, right up until the exact moment the disaster actually strikes. Which leads us to Section 3, the Lifechanyuan Mission, a spiritual haven. Here's where we transition from physical mechanics into spiritual philosophy. Xu Feng introduces his organization called Lifechanyuan. He established the spiritual haven specifically to address the fate of humanity in the face of these hidden impending disasters. And tying right back into his previous point about how society treats warnings, he notes that this mission faces constant ridicule and cold indifference. In fact, he explicitly compares his organization to Noah building the ark on a mountaintop. It was an act that drew relentless mockery and laughter from all the smart people of the time. Well, at least until the rain actually started to fall. To back up this mission, the author points to some serious, high-level spiritual sources. He asserts that he has been particularly favored by the greatest creator, God, Jesus, and Buddha Shakyamuni. He claims these grand religious figures have basically handed him the keys to wisdom, giving him the authority to establish Lifechanyuan. They've also bestowed upon him a specific, highly metaphorical mission, the honor of harvesting crops. It's a very bold claim, and it dramatically elevates the stakes of his warning from a simple observation about a car part to a full-blown divine mandate. Now, the author totally gets that modern people are going to be skeptical of such massive claims. So how does he defend against that inevitable skepticism? By looking at history. He asks us to consider this. In their respective eras, how many people truly understood Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, or Laozi? How many actually believed them when they were walking the earth? By aligning his current reception with the historical persecution of these major prophets, Xu Feng argues that being doubted and mocked is actually a traditional hallmark of bringing a true vital message to humanity. He also tackles his critics head-on. Some accuse him of acting as a self-appointed spokesperson, or even of trying to create God to serve his own ends. He counters this by pointing directly to his written work, specifically the chapter of the greatest creator. He asserts that this book is a comprehensive explanation of the divine, arguing that it is simply unparalleled in human history. He completely rejects the idea that the greatest creator can be invented by a human being. Instead, he positions himself as someone who is finally, fully explaining this ultimate reality to a world that desperately needs to understand it before the axle breaks. And finally, Section 4, the final warning, before it's too late. So we're back to the big cosmic stakes that kicked off this whole explainer. Here's the chilling question that represents the core tragedy of the unseen broken axle. Who truly believes before the disaster hits? When everything seems perfectly fine, when the van is driving smoothly, when society is functioning normally? Who is actually willing to look at the invisible fraying and take action? Human history, if we follow the author's logic, suggests the answer is almost no one. We all just wait for the thunderclap. Xu Feng leaves us with this incredibly stark, provocative final thought. Do not come running later, shouting, "Greatest creator, now I believe," after the axle breaks. By then, it'll be too late. It really forces us to reckon with the unseen forces in our own lives, right? Our health, our societies, our planet. Are we actively checking our axles, or are we just driving fast, completely oblivious, and waiting for the snap? It's a lot to think about. Keep your eyes open for that silent thunder, everyone.